Karen asked the question, how can citizens advocate for the pay raise we requested from the Board of County Commissioners? Thank you, Karen, for your support and your concern. We encourage all citizens, as we have with our current public relations push, to, number one, get yourself educated and informed on the budget. And here's why I say that, Karen. We don't want people just rushing headlong into taking on an issue, if you will, and while symbolically that appears to be very good, and we most assuredly, enjoy and look forward to any support that we get from our community. We want you to understand that you are supporting a just and righteous cause, and that is, the pay raises and the pay compression issues that have developed at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office have been coming close to a decade now, that it's continually been taken off the front burner by the Board of County Commissioners, and the issue has not been addressed. And so call your county commissioner, get engaged with the people at your churches and at your schools and the place that you work, and advocate that way, and ask that the county commissioner be called and asked to support the Escambia County Sheriff's Office budget request. Again, get smart on the budget. Ask for the documents. Ask questions, because they can be very confusing unless you're in government service. Find out where your money's being spent and what for. We welcome those questions at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, and we're prepared to answer each and every one. Thank you for your question. Sean asked the question that, or actually the statement, he says that he would like to see raises for deputies. Is there anything, currently within our budget that can be adjusted, and, basically what can be done? Well, Sean, our pay raises, or our pay structure, excuse me, those are two really separate issues. The pay is still as it was when I entered office 8 years ago, and it was actually that pay scale even prior to that in the last administration. All new deputies begin at around $31,000, $32,000. Upon completion of the Georgestone Academy, they become certified and we put them on the road. They go to approximately $35,000 a year. They get about a $2,700 a year bump in pay. Now, let's go back to that, where we went 7 years, and this is prior to my administration, but the deputies at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office went a period of 7 years without any pay raises. Now, the thing that had happened prior to that is there was a salary study. Unfortunately, it was never fully implemented. It was called the Fox-Lawson study. Now, at the end of that 7-year period, the Board of County Commissioners came in, and the first 3% pay raise that was given to the deputies was not actually a pay raise at all. You say, well, how can you get a 3% increase in your pay and it not be a pay raise? If you recall, Governor Scott went back to the Florida legislature, and in order to help balance and make solid, if you will, and functional the Florida retirement system, to ensure, again, that it would be viable in the out years, upped by 3% all employees' contributions who were participating in what's called FRS, the Florida retirement system. So had they not received that pay raise of 3%, they would have actually been making 3% less than those scales that I just pointed out. We started around 31, 32, go to 35. So that was basically to keep our employees whole. In the next few years, they did, in fact, over the last 4 years, receive 3% increases. Now, here lies the problem. And again, this is where I think it puts it in best perspective for people. Let's say 7 years ago, I signed on as an Escambia County deputy. And I'm going through my career, and I go year after year after year, and my salary's pretty flat because we're not getting any pay raises. And after I've been at the Sheriff's Office for about 5 years, you joined the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. Now, I'm a 5-year seasoned deputy coming up to my 6th year, where I'm hitting really my kind of peak time as far as my experience in the background. And you're making the same amount of money that I am. There really isn't any difference between the two of us. Now, I have 6 years on the road, you have 1, but you're making the same salary. And now the county commission comes in and says, we're going to bestow upon you, Sheriff, a 3% pay raise. I get 3%, you get 3%. We're still making the same salary. I'm getting no credit for the time that I have in service. That's where the pay scales and the compression comes in, meaning that we are now moving this problem along, and now we hit 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, etc. And unless we're going up the scale for, master deputies and senior deputies, etc., which are some of the pay gradients that we've got at the Sheriff's Office, or one of us makes sergeant, we're basically flatlining that pay study. And remember, our deputies were never made whole. meaning that that initial pay scale, the starting salary, was never up to where it should be. So if we look back over that 7-year period and just add about 3% per year is what the deputy should have made, we're looking at probably $41,000 to $46,000, depending upon what you bring to the table when you would have signed on at the sheriff's office. Meaning, do you have a college degree? Are you a certified officer? Do you have experience at another agency? The low end of the salary would have been right at 42 and a high of 46. That's where the pay should be for starting deputies today in round numbers. And of course, we're nowhere close to that. Now, you say, well, what can we adjust within the budget? Sean, we've adjusted everywhere. We have 433 authorized sworn positions at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. The rest of our folks, which is around 258, we call support personnel. They're administrative staff, they work in civil process, crime scene, our techs that work over there. Almost all of those folks are civilians. So we have, today a force of about 703, 704 people. All of that's affected by this pay compression. Not just our sworn officers, but our support staff is also affected by this. So we partnered with the county and asked that they do a pay study to right-size this. The total cost to make all the pay right, because right now we've adjusted everything that we can at the sheriff's office. There are those folks who want to nitpick the process. Well, Sheriff, if you didn't have such a large command staff, or if you didn't drive Tahoes, or if you didn't do this, you can find money there. On its surface, that's a pretty good response, isn't it? Yeah, we could reduce nickels and dimes, and that's really what it comes down to there. And what we're really doing is where do you stop that? How about air conditioning in vehicles? You really could get by without an air conditioner, couldn't you? How about the computers in the cars? Well, maybe not every car needs a computer. How about we have the sergeant drive around to everybody and pass on what dispatch is telling them? You really don't need a vest unless you're responding to a shooting, so how about we just buy a certain number of vests and we only respond to one location and put our vests on before we go there? How about hubcaps on the vehicle? You really don't need hubcaps on your car. That's kind of an extra added option, isn't it? So where does this stop? I would tell folks, look at the current management of the sheriff's office. We have one of the highest homicide solve rates in the nation. Our sex crimes unit is so good that we're one of the few places in Florida where our sex crimes has declined in the last couple of years, to include domestic violence. So again, you pay for what you get. Now the issue is with budget shifting and how do you get those numbers up? Again, 433 is what I'm funded for by the Board of County Commissioners. Right now we're at about 360 people. 360 people. You're 70, 73 people short. In that pipeline, as we call it, we have people who have applied at the sheriff's office, some that are currently in the academy. That entire process can take up to a year. Now, during that time, I'm going to have people at the sheriff's office that retire. So the number I just gave you will be inaccurate in the next week. The people that go through the academy, our attrition rate is tremendous, meaning that we hire an academy class of 30 people. We might be lucky in fielding between 20 and 25. That many will fall out of the training program. So we are continually in a learning curve here. A lot of people come and quit in the most critical time, where really our attrition is the worst, is between that 6 and 12 year point. We're losing people faster than we can train them. That's why we're looking at what I refer to as these draconian measures in Escambia County. Again, everyone's wanting to know, well, Sheriff, if you get rid of your command staff or do whatever, that's not solving my problem. Money is part of the problem. And if I've got to get the money to stop the attrition rate that I currently have. But right now, we're short of officers on the street. And so that's why we're looking at non-critical functions, doing away with them. And I realize that, the budget acts is something that nobody wants to deal with. Somebody has to. You can't deficit spend in the state of Florida. It's against Florida statute. I can't have a budget of, say, $1,000 and spend $1,001. That violates the law in Florida. I have to spend under that number. My problem is money, getting and recruiting and retaining deputies, and contending with the attrition. This has been building now for over 8.5 years since I've been the sheriff. We've addressed this to the Board of County Commissioners annually, every year that I've been in office. And guess what? It's fallen on deaf ears. So if anyone wonders why we're making such a tremendous push here to educate the community as a whole and to bring the county commission to the table to negotiate in good faith, that is why. We're going to be making some extremely difficult decisions in the next couple of months. And rest assured, I'm going to make them. Sean wants to know exactly, how much money is needed. Again, Sean, I would ask that everybody go to the Board of County Commissioners website. You can also go to our website. We have published that information there. Of course, our budget is certified every year to the Board of County Commissioners, and then of course it's whittled away. We've asked for the 3.6 increase in our budget, and let me just I'm not sure, Sean, if we can get a copy of this. So let me tell you what you need to look for when you go to our website. This year we've asked for a little bit over $56 million. It's 56.6. That includes again our 3.6 increase. Now that's increment one to solve our pay issues. As I said, in another section of our Ask the Sheriff here, where we've incrementally looked at working the pay issues, pay compression issues. The total package, if we could get the money today, the funding today, to fix our salary step problems and the compression problems, is over $16 million. And Sean, that's unrealistic. We know in tough economic times, and although we're coming out of the recession, we're not completely out of the recession. That's why we in good faith went to the county commission some time ago and said, let's incrementally, up the sheriff's budget to address this issue, to stop our loss of personnel who are quitting, who are leaving. Just our attrition rate is just horrible, or they're retiring early because they're actually losing money. As we said in one of our earlier videos, the pay has become so out of whack. Deputies that retired in 2009 have more retirement pay than our deputies who are going to be retiring in 2023. That is so upside down and backwards. I'm not sure how anybody can't understand that. But we know we can't get $16 million in one fell swoop from the county. So we asked the county to negotiate with us in good faith, and let's incrementally over the next 5 years, do $3 million at a time, basically. And so we would get to that $16 million that we need to right size the pay. So, add $16 million in today's dollars to the 56, and that's approximately the number that we would need to fix it across the board. But for this year, we only need 56.6. Our issue, Sean, with the county commission is this, and you're absolutely correct. We seem to have money for everything but the sheriff's office. And now the county, I'll be perfectly honest with you, is putting out propaganda that's just not true. We go to the county commission and they put numbers up. Commissioner Berry's one right now that's stating, well, we've given the sheriff over $10 million over the last several years. Well, number one, it's only $8 million. And if you sit down and look at our budget breakout, we'll show you exactly where that money went. It wasn't extra money, which is what they're implying, that I could have taken this money and magically fixed the pay problem and given everybody a 3% pay raise, right-sized the pay compression. Sheriff, what are you doing with this money? And we get back to the issue of why are you driving Tahoes? Why do you have air conditioning? Why do you wear uniforms? To be quite honest with you, Sean, give me a break. Again, we're managing the sheriff's office very efficiently. So those are the total numbers that we need. And so if you want to talk to your county commission, ask them to work with the sheriff's office to incrementally increase the sheriff's budget to right-size the pay issues that we have here. They're not going to go away, and I agree with you. While the county continues to expand the tax liability base, we talk a lot about more community centers and more parks, etc. Those require upkeep. County spends about $2 million a year on roads and grounds and upkeep of parks on the recreational side. So why is it that a commissioner who refuses to raise taxes, as a matter of fact, wants to roll taxes back, the ad valorem taxes, continue in their district to build more programs, if you will, meaning community centers and parks that are going to require more tax dollars? I think the reason is because you're not considering law enforcement. If it's for my community and benefits me politically in my particular district, then I will do it. And that's really what it comes down to, doesn't it? Instead of looking at the community and what's good for the community as a whole. We have more of a countywide global view, if you will, being countywide elected constitutional officers, because I'm not so concerned about District 1. I'm concerned about District 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And these things benefit the districts as a whole. I'm also growing a little bit tired of commissioners telling us how much they support law enforcement. Really? And just exactly how have you done that? By putting out propaganda? By commissioners refusing to look at the tax base? If you'll notice, they'll talk about everything but raising taxes. But isn't that interesting when you look at that? They raised the gas tax to support ECUA. They raised the MSTU to support some things in the fire department. And across the board, you'll find areas where the county, if it directly affects them, will raise the appropriate revenue to fix it. When it comes to the sheriff's office, we get basically what's left over. Those days are over. That's why we're going to go to the governor. We're going to get the governor, the attorney general, the chief financial officer of the state, and the rest of the governor's executive board to make this decision for Escambia County. I'm currently working with a group of county commissioners, with the exception of Commissioner Doug Underhill, let me give the appropriate credit where credit is due, that is unwilling to address this issue. So we'll take them to a third party who will compel them to address this issue. Nicole asked about why don't in Florida, we look at recreational use of marijuana, redefining the penalties, if you will. It's a great revenue tax base, and she cited Nevada as an example. Well, of course, Nicole, the first answer to your question is we don't change those laws at sheriff's offices. You need to work through your legislators. That's the Florida House of Representatives and, of course, the Florida Senate. They are the ones that make the call on the enactments of the laws, and, of course, it has to meet certain legal requirements. However, Nicole, I would take issue with you on your numbers. This is a little bit like gambling being a panacea to every state's problem, with their revenue flows and sources. What they're also finding in states like Colorado, who began the recreational use of marijuana sooner, as with California, there's a time frame here that you'll have to catch up with. Number one, it hasn't stemmed the flow of illegal marijuana trade in either one of those states. Why? Because the illegal marijuana trade is undercutting that which is being sold through government agencies, meaning, it's a marijuana price war, if you will, for lack of a better term. Also, what you're going to find in a very short period of time, as Colorado is finding, is that you now have to up social services, meaning that you have a large group of people coming to your state who are basically stoned. What you're assuming, just like with alcohol, is that people will be rational and reasonable recreational users of marijuana. I think that's kind of a stretch. I think you're expecting more from people than we can really, depend upon for a return. It also causes problems in law enforcement. How do we deal with deputies now who use marijuana, or police officers or correctional officers? How about the fire department and EMS? You've now made it a legal substance. Driving under the influence with marijuana, whether it's prescribed for, whether it's prescribed for medical use or it's for recreational use. You're bringing a whole host of societal problems by basically the throwing open the door for another substance, that causes, mild hallucinogenic effects, whether you consume alcohol to the point that you have blackouts or you get stoned on marijuana. It really doesn't matter. I will tell you, from a law enforcement perspective, study after study has proven that it is in fact a gateway drug. It's basically the lessening of society's acceptance of other drug usage. It brings more grief to a community than it solves. There isn't anything that's a panacea for a community's economic woes. Gambling is not, marijuana is not. What is good, steady economic growth through jobs, education, etc. That's how a community comes out of an economic slump and sustains it. It certainly isn't with these flash-in-the-pan ideas. Ron, thank you. You have a kind of a complex question. You've got actually a couple of points and a couple of questions. A compliment, and thank you so much for the increase in the neighborhood watches and their activity. Thank you for supporting the raises to law enforcement, and of course the question, what can you all do to make our jobs easier? If you are an active participant, Ron, in a neighborhood watch group, you're doing that very thing. As we say in all of our neighborhood watch groups and in our Citizens Law Enforcement Academy, our citizens, if actively engaged and energized, are the eyes and ears of law enforcement. We can't be everywhere all the time. We have 1.4 officers per 1,000 residents in Escambia County. 1.4 for every 1,000 residents. So, basically an officer for every 1,000 people. We have 303,000 in Escambia County, as noted by our last census that was taken just, I think, 2 years ago. So, again, we can't be everywhere. We depend upon you to do that. And right now, the taxes that you pay for deputies is one of the lowest, especially in this region, by a study that was just recently completed by Chief Deputy Eric Haynes, our administrative chief deputy. You pay $216 per resident per year for your law enforcement coverage. That works out to be about $4.15 a week. Let's compare that to the city, who pays $300 approximately per resident per year for their law enforcement officers. Pinellas County pays $452 per resident per year. So again, we have some of the lowest tax base rates to support public safety anywhere in the state of Florida. So again, call your county commissioner. One of the great ways that you can support law enforcement is to energize the county commission and let them know that public safety is one of the most critical parts of any county's infrastructure. If you continue to underfund it, I can only tell you that it will result in things that are devastating to all of us. Questions from citizens about the use of billboards in the current budget fight. I will tell you this is a common practice, although it's never been done in Escambia County. I certainly haven't done this before. It's the first time. Many sheriffs in some of the counties in Florida do a mail out during budget time, outlining for the citizens. They call it, a status of the sheriff's office report, the budget of the sheriff's office, etc. And they actually do a physical mail out to all the citizens to let them know, what last year's budget was, what they're projecting for the next year, where the money's going to be spent, etc. We've not done that since I've been the sheriff, because that can be a $35,000, $40,000 cost for a one-time mail out to do that. So what we have chosen to do in Escambia County in the area of public service announcements, crime prevention, as all of you know, our electronic billboards, we have a certain number that we have leased from Lamar. We have an ongoing lease for that. We can change those billboards between 15 and 30 minutes, meaning if we have a very hot case, some of you may recall, unfortunately, the Naomi Jones case, the Boyette case, we can get information up on those electronic billboards throughout the county very, very quickly, and we can change them back. We have chosen to engage the community in the budget fight. Why? Because we believe that we are right. We believe you need to call your county commissioner. You need to ask for the budget numbers and again, be engaged in your government. This, folks, is government in the sunshine. The sheriff doesn't have anything to hide. The sheriff wants you to call your county commissioner and get smart on the budget. And oh, by the way, when you get the propaganda from a couple of the commissioners, we ask that you come to ECSO.com to get the accurate numbers. Again, when we have a commissioner that says we were increased by $10 million, when the number was really only 8, and we can show you directly where every dollar was spent. This funding comes from part of the general fund that is for that specifically, meaning community outreach, public relations, advertising, etc. This money for billboards cannot, I repeat, cannot be used for deputy salaries. It's referred to as non-recurring funds, meaning I can't use this money to hire a deputy. Why? Because the money may not be there next year. So we can't hire a deputy this year and then let them go next year because the funding line I hired you under is, oh, by the way, I don't have any money for your salary. So once again, folks, give us a little credit for having a little common sense at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. We're spending your tax dollars appropriately. Why? Because we get audited every year. So if you're wondering how your tax dollars are being spent and is it legal, ask Saltmarsh, Cleveland & Gunn, and some of the other fine agencies that again audit us every year. Go and ask your comptroller, who is Pam Childers. She's also the clerk of the circuit court, and the Board of County Commissioners. They all have our budget. That's called government in the sunshine. So we're trying to educate the people in Escambia County. I know many of you don't like that, and I guess I would ask, why don't you? I would like to know exactly what my government's doing and why they're not spending the money for law enforcement, fire department, and EMS. Sean asks, what are we going to do with the SROs if we take them out of schools? Well, Sean, number one, our budget in this process that we're going to go through appealing to the governor, let's say that it continues through, your budget is frozen at last year's rate, meaning that the county commission obviously can't zero out the sheriff's budget. So our budget is frozen at last year's rates, meaning that we're going to maintain where we are as low as and as short as we are. The SROs will be assigned normal or routine patrol functions. Those that are qualified or selected, some may go to investigations. We would like to be able to, again, keep them ready to return to SRO duties should our budget come through and our ability to up our numbers. But right now, again, we're short on patrol, and we get shorter every day. And so they will be street deputies patrolling the streets of Escambia County as opposed to being in the hallways of the school system in Escambia County. The community is asking, it's really a legal question. I would really ask that you contact the Attorney General's office, and that's Pam Bondi in the state of Florida. You could actually start locally. You could ask the state attorney's office. They more than likely will refer you to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement or to General Pam Bondi's office, one or the other. But not getting out in the weeds on the legal side of it. The questions are, can we recall the Board of County Commissioners? How do we put them under investigation if we suspect they're mismanaging the county budget, etc.? All those questions can be answered by the Attorney General's office as to the process. I will tell you that all elected officials basically serve for the governor. I know I report directly to the governor. In the event that I commit a crime that, again, rises to the level of being removed from office, that's who removes you from office. You may remember not that long ago in Escambia County, 4 county commissioners were removed by, at that time, Governor Bush for illegal activity, and all 4 were eventually charged with that crime and removed from office. And he appointed 4 commissioners to finish their terms. That was how Commissioner Marie Young came to sit, I know, on the Board of County Commissioners. So there are processes for that. It does require investigations. It does require, again, a proof of any allegations. I can tell you again, as contentious as the relationship can be with the county commission, if I was a citizen that suspected that, that's what I would do. I will also tell you as your sheriff, if I suspected that, we would open an investigation also. So I have no reason to believe at this time that there's any illegal activity that's occurred. It's very frustrating, that we're at a disagreement. But I can also tell you, if I ever suspect or I think there is illegal activity, as a sheriff of Escambia County, I certainly have no issue with partnering with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and doing that very thing. But before you do that, just like anyone, it's easy to file a complaint. It's easy to hurl allegations, whether it's at me or the Board of County Commission. Ask some questions. Ask for the answers before you jump off the edge of the cliff, and see what the answers are that you get. Make sure that they're truthful and honest. And if you're not getting straight answers from any elected official, because we have very open and liberal public records laws here, and we're required, believe it or not, as elected officials to deal openly and honestly with our constituents. Ask the questions and look for the answers before you kind of pull the trigger.